Why do certain men never get friendzoned? They walk into any social situation. Women compete for their attention. Other men respect them instantly. Meanwhile, most guys get labelled as nice and forgotten within minutes. But here's the twisted part. These men aren't better looking, richer, or more charming. They understand one dark psychological truth that 99% of men will never learn, because it destroys everything you've been taught about attraction. Most men spend their entire lives confused, chasing love, validation and happiness from women, only to end up heartbroken, used, or trapped in relationships that slowly drain their soul. But 200 years ago, Schopenhauer exposed the raw truth about what you call love, and it's nothing like the fairy tale you've been sold. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." But Schopenhauer went deeper. He didn't just observe human behaviour, he dissected the biological machinery controlling it, revealing truths so uncomfortable that society still refuses to acknowledge them. Schopenhauer didn't believe in romantic fantasies. He saw love for what it really is, not a spiritual bond, not destiny, not some mystical connection between souls, but a biological trick, a ruthless illusion designed by nature for one singular purpose: reproduction. Here's the uncomfortable truth that will shatter everything you thought you knew about relationships. When you feel that electric attraction, that obsessive desire, that absolute conviction that she's the one, your brain isn't connecting with her soul, it's calculating, subconsciously assessing fertility markers, genetic compatibility, survival advantages, and women, their attraction operates the same way, just with different evolutionary priorities. Schopenhauer wrote, "Love is the ultimate goal of almost all human effort. It is more important than anything else in life." But he didn't mean that romantically. He meant it as a warning, recognizing love as a trap, a fleeting chemical high that fades the moment it serves its biological purpose. Think about this honestly. How many men have you watched completely destroy themselves for a woman who later walked away without a second thought? How many marriages have you witnessed crumble once the initial passion evaporated? That's not coincidence. That's not bad luck. That's nature's design working exactly as intended. Jung understood that we project our unconscious desires onto others, creating elaborate fantasies about who they are. But Schopenhauer revealed something darker. These projections aren't random romantic delusions. They're strategic biological programs designed to make you serve genetic imperatives that have nothing to do with your individual happiness or fulfillment. Here's the brutal reality that most men refuse to accept. Women don't choose men based on fairness, loyalty, devotion, or even logic. They follow an ancient selection program hardwired over millions of years to seek status, security, and genetic superiority. A man's devotion means absolutely nothing if he can't provide these evolutionary requirements. Schopenhauer saw this with devastating clarity. Women are rarely guided by reason, he observed. They are ruled by instinct and emotion. This isn't misogyny, it's biological observation that modern science has repeatedly confirmed. Look at the evidence everywhere around you. Dating apps where 80% of women compete for the same top 20% of men, completely ignoring decent, hard-working, loyal men. Divorce courts where decades of commitment and sacrifice are rewarded with financial ruin and separation from children. History filled with kings who literally died for mistresses who betrayed them the moment a better option appeared. The pattern never changes because the underlying biology never changes. Most men operate under a catastrophically false assumption. They believe love is mutual and reciprocal, that if they just sacrifice enough, care enough, prove their worth enough, they'll eventually be rewarded with loyalty and genuine affection. They think relationships are based on fairness and moral reciprocity. But Schopenhauer warned, to be loved, one must not be just, but clever. Women don't fall for nice. They don't fall for fair. They don't fall for devoted. They fall for strength, not just physical, but social, financial, and psychological dominance. This is why the good guy finishes last isn't just a bitter saying. It's a biological law. The good guy doesn't finish last because he's unworthy or because women are evil. He finishes last because he fundamentally misunderstands the game being played. He thinks love is earned through service and sacrifice. Women's biology is programmed to be attracted to men who don't need to serve anyone, men who are served. Have you ever noticed how women lose interest once they've secured a man? How the dynamic suddenly reverses and the chase begins going the other way? Schopenhauer called this the tragedy of possession. The thrill isn't in having, it's in conquering. Once the conquest is complete, biology moves on to the next target. That's why men who cling too hard, who make her the centre of their universe, inevitably watch her walk away. But here's the twist that changes everything. This isn't women's fault, it's nature's programming. And the man who understands this stops wasting energy on blame and starts developing strategy. Schopenhauer saw what most men today still refuse to admit. The rules of attraction aren't fair, they aren't logical, and they certainly aren't designed in your favour. While modern society preaches equality and fairness, biology operates on completely different laws, and the man who ignores this biological reality has already lost before the game begins. Here's the brutal truth that will disturb everything you believe about modern relationships. Women hold the ultimate leverage, not because they're cruel or manipulative by choice, but because nature designed them to be the selectors in the reproductive process. From the moment puberty hits, a woman's sexual market value peaks, while a man's must be painstakingly built through struggle, achievement, status, and survival. Schopenhauer put it bluntly: women are suited to being the nurses and teachers of our childhood by the very fact that they themselves are childish, frivolous, and short-sighted. He wasn't insulting them, he was highlighting an evolutionary truth. A woman's youth and beauty are her primary currency, and she instinctively knows how to spend this currency for maximum return. Look around at the modern landscape. The average man today is drowning in a psychological paradox that's destroying his sanity. He's told to be emotionally vulnerable and sensitive, while women still gravitate toward dominance and strength. He's shamed for wanting traditional masculinity while alpha males dominate dating apps and social hierarchies. He's worked to exhaustion, providing resources in a system that rewards his sacrifice with divorce courts and paternity uncertainty. Schopenhauer warned of this centuries ago when he wrote, "Women are directly fitted for acting as the nurses and teachers of childhood by the fact that they are themselves childish, frivolous, and short-sighted. In a word, they are big children all their lives." But here's where the situation becomes truly dangerous for modern men. Contemporary women haven't just embraced their biological power, they've weaponized it through technology and social structures. Social media has transformed attention into an economy, and the average man has become an unpaid labourer in this system. He simps, he orbits, he competes desperately for scraps of validation from women who will never commit to him. Why does this happen? Because he's been sold a fundamental lie, that devotion and niceness alone are enough to earn love and loyalty. Here's where Schopenhauer's insights become truly disturbing. He made an observation that modern psychology confirms but mainstream culture refuses to discuss. Women are systematically trained to be incapable of genuine love. This sounds harsh until you understand what he actually meant. Female love is fundamentally conditional. It's tied to utility, not to the person himself. A man isn't cherished for his essential being, his character, or his soul. He's valued for what he provides: status, security, genetic material, emotional validation, resources, protection. The moment he stops providing these things or fails to maintain his value relative to other available options, the love evaporates as if it never existed. This isn't cynicism, it's survival programming that's been refined over millions of years. Women are biologically hardwired to continuously seek the best possible mate for their offspring. If a man stagnates in his development, she will resent him. If he falls behind other men in status or capability, she will replace him. And modern society doesn't just accept this, it celebrates it as female empowerment and knowing your worth. Schopenhauer divided men into two fundamental categories that explain everything you see in modern dating: those who serve and those who are served. The beta male exhausts himself trying to prove his worth through sacrifice, devotion, and service. The alpha commands worth effortlessly through presence, confidence, and power. One begs for loyalty and receives contempt. The other inspires obsession without trying. You can see this pattern destroying men everywhere. The office worker who sacrifices his health working overtime for promotions, hoping it will make his wife respect him again, only to watch her grow more contemptuous of his desperation. The gym rat who transforms his physique thinking it will win back her affection, only to discover that women now want him for physical pleasure, but still won't commit emotionally. The simp who spends his paycheck on a woman who ghosts him the second a higher status man shows interest. These men aren't victims of circumstance. They're volunteers in their own psychological destruction because they refuse to see what Schopenhauer exposed centuries ago. Schopenhauer uncovered a disturbing truth that modern psychology now confirms but mainstream culture desperately hides. Women don't compete like men. They don't challenge you directly. They don't flex their power where you can see it. Their greatest weapon is invisible, instinctive, and devastatingly effective: emotional manipulation and reality distortion. While men fight with their fists or their logic, women wage psychological warfare through perception itself. They don't need to conquer territories. They manipulate reality until you believe their victory was your idea all along. Consider this dynamic that's probably playing out in your relationships right now. When a man wants something, he asks for it directly or demands it openly. When a woman wants something, she creates elaborate psychological scenarios where you end up giving it to her voluntarily, often while believing you initiated the idea yourself. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. Women are adapted to a sedentary life by their lack of physical strength, and to the care of children by their natural inclination. Hence, they live more in the present than men. But this present moment focus gives them a dangerous advantage in psychological combat. They read micro-expressions, tone shifts, and social dynamics with supernatural accuracy. When you think you're having a casual conversation, she's conducting a psychological interrogation, gathering intelligence about your weaknesses, insecurities, fears, and pressure points. Modern men believe they're in control of their relationships and interactions. They're catastrophically wrong. From the first date to the divorce papers, women guide every interaction through subtle tests that most men fail without even realizing they're being tested. The compliance test: how quickly you rearrange your entire schedule and priorities to accommodate her whims. The frame test: whether you maintain your position and values when she becomes emotional, or if you cave to avoid conflict. The investment test: whether you end up chasing her harder than she chases you, revealing your higher level of need and investment. Schopenhauer warned, women are instinctively crafty and have an innate talent for deception. This isn't moral evil. It's evolutionary programming refined over millions of years. In a world where physical strength alone didn't guarantee survival or reproductive success, emotional intelligence and psychological manipulation became the ultimate survival tools. The women who couldn't navigate and control male psychology didn't reproduce successfully. The genes of emotionally manipulative women dominated the gene pool because these tactics worked reliably across cultures and centuries. Here's where modern men walk blindly into psychological traps that destroy their lives. They consistently confuse a woman's attention and affection for genuine interest and love. But Schopenhauer revealed the dark reality behind this confusion. Women are most drawn to men who don't need them, he observed. The moment you make a woman your primary purpose, your main source of validation, or your reason for living, is the exact moment she loses respect for you and begins looking for your replacement. This explains every pattern that confuses and destroys modern men. Why nice guys finish last. Why marriages crumble after men sacrifice their individual ambitions for the relationship. Why women pursue emotionally unavailable men while rejecting devoted ones. Why she loses interest the moment you become too available or invested. It's not that women consciously want to be treated poorly or desire unhealthy relationships. They're biologically programmed to seek men of higher value than themselves. And nothing destroys perceived value faster than desperate neediness, constant availability, or making her the center of your universe. Every single interaction you have with a woman contains an unspoken power struggle. Most men lose this battle before they even realize it's begun because they're operating from completely false assumptions about female psychology. She cries during arguments to avoid taking responsibility for her actions, and you comfort her instead of holding her accountable. She withholds physical and emotional affection to train you into compliance with her wishes, and you try harder to please her instead of recognizing the manipulation. She flirts with other men to test your confidence and measure your reaction, and you either become jealous, proving insecurity, or try to compete, proving you can be controlled. Schopenhauer called this the tyranny of the weak, using perceived vulnerability as a weapon to control stronger adversaries. Women leverage their emotional states, their tears, their apparent fragility to manipulate men who could physically dominate them, but are psychologically enslaved by protective instincts and romantic idealism. The man who falls for these tactics becomes a psychological slave. The man who recognizes them and remains unmoved becomes psychologically untouchable. But here's where Schopenhauer's philosophy transforms from depressing observation to revolutionary liberation. His most powerful insight wasn't about female nature, it was about male potential for transcendence. The first step to freedom is seeing the chains, he wrote. Once you understand that female behavior isn't personal, it's biological programming, you stop taking it personally. You stop wasting emotional energy on resentment, blame, or trying to change what can't be changed. You stop begging for loyalty and start inspiring it through your own value and strength. The most dangerous lies, Schopenhauer realized, aren't the ones women tell men. They're the lies men tell themselves about the nature of love, relationships, and female psychology. After exposing these brutal truths about attraction and power dynamics, Schopenhauer offered something far more valuable than mere understanding: a practical path to psychological liberation. This isn't about defeating women or winning some battle between the sexes. It's about transcending the entire game by becoming so internally complete that external validation becomes optional rather than essential. Modern men make one fatal error that destroys their lives. They believe happiness, fulfillment, and self-worth come from female validation and approval. Schopenhauer saw through this illusion with devastating clarity. The happiness which we receive from ourselves is greater than that which we obtain from our surroundings, he wrote. The men who truly thrive in life aren't those who successfully conquer women. They're those who have conquered themselves first. They develop purposes so consuming, so intrinsically rewarding, that female attention becomes a pleasant bonus rather than a life or death necessity. History's most remarkable men, the artists, inventors, warriors, philosophers, empire builders, weren't distracted by the desperate chase for romantic validation. They were too busy creating legacies that outlasted their lifetimes. Schopenhauer identified 3 critical areas where men must achieve mastery to transcend the biological and social programming that enslaves most humans. Economic sovereignty. Schopenhauer warned that money is human happiness in the abstract, not for the material possessions it can buy, but for the psychological freedom it provides. The man who controls his financial destiny cannot be controlled through economic manipulation or dependency. He's not forced to tolerate disrespect, accept bad treatment, or compromise his values because he needs someone else's resources for survival. Most men unknowingly surrender their power by becoming financially dependent on others, or by living paycheck to paycheck. This economic vulnerability makes them susceptible to manipulation and forces them to accept situations that don't serve their highest good. Economic sovereignty gives you the power to walk away from any relationship, job, or situation that doesn't meet your standards. Philosophical depth. Most men live on complete autopilot, accepting social conditioning and cultural programming without question. They believe what they're told to believe, want what they're told to want, and pursue goals that were installed by others rather than chosen consciously. The exceptional man cultivates intellectual independence. He reads philosophy, studies psychology, understands history, and develops critical thinking skills that allow him to see through propaganda and social manipulation. When you can think for yourself, you become immune to the psychological techniques that control most people. This intellectual development isn't about accumulating information. It's about developing the wisdom to distinguish between truth and comfortable lies, between authentic desires and programmed wants, between genuine relationships and transactional arrangements. Physical mastery. The body isn't just a tool for attraction or health. It's the foundation of psychological strength and the vessel through which your will operates in the physical world. Physical weakness inevitably breeds mental weakness, emotional fragility, and spiritual confusion. This doesn't mean becoming a professional athlete or bodybuilder. It means developing the kind of physical competence and confidence that makes you unshakable in any situation. When you know you can handle yourself physically, you naturally become more psychologically resilient and emotionally stable. Physical training also develops discipline, delayed gratification, pain tolerance, and mental toughness that carry over into every area of life. The man who has pushed through physical barriers knows he can overcome any obstacle through persistence and will. Here's where Schopenhauer's wisdom becomes truly revolutionary and life-changing. The safest way of not being very miserable is not to expect to be very happy. This isn't pessimism, It's emotional armor that protects you from the devastating disappointments that destroy most men's psychological stability. When you stop expecting others to make you happy, you stop being crushed when they inevitably fail to do so. When you stop needing approval and validation from others, you stop being hurt by its absence. The modern man who stops begging for love, approval, and fairness suddenly finds these things flowing to him naturally. Why? Because he's removed himself from the desperate masses competing for scraps of attention and validation. He's become psychologically scarce, and scarcity creates attraction and respect. This is the paradox of attraction that most men never understand. The less you need something, the more likely you are to receive it. The less you chase, the more you're pursued. The less you invest emotionally, the more others become invested in you. The battle between men and women isn't personal. It's biological theatre that's been playing out across millennia. The man who awakens to this reality stops taking female behaviour personally and starts responding strategically rather than emotionally. He doesn't resent female nature because he understands it's not a conscious choice. It's evolutionary programming operating below the level of awareness. Instead of fighting against this programming or trying to change it, he adapts to it by becoming immune to its effects on his psychological state. He builds a life so compelling, so internally rewarding, that female attention becomes optional rather than essential. He develops purposes so consuming that he's no longer distracted by the need to chase validation. He becomes so comfortable with solitude that companionship must genuinely add value to his life rather than fill an emotional void. Schopenhauer's ultimate lesson cuts to the core of human existence. We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. The choice is yours. You can continue sacrificing your authentic self to fit others' expectations, chasing approval from people who don't understand or appreciate your true nature. Or you can step into the psychological power that comes from complete self-acceptance and inner sovereignty. This journey isn't about becoming cold, cruel, or indifferent to others' well-being. It's about developing the kind of inner strength that doesn't need external validation to prove itself. It's about becoming so psychologically complete that you can engage with others from a position of abundance rather than neediness. When you no longer need anyone else to complete you, validate you, or behave a certain way for you to maintain your peace, you achieve genuine freedom. And freedom, not neediness, not desperation, not validation seeking, is what attracts authentic connection and genuine respect. The path to this understanding is brutal and lonely. It requires you to face psychological shadows you've been avoiding your entire life. You must kill parts of yourself that still beg for approval, still seek external validation, still believe that someone else can provide what you must develop within yourself. But on the other side of this inner work lies something that most men never experience: the ability to love without attachment, to care without trying to control, to engage with others without losing yourself in the process. Schopenhauer spent his entire life studying the nature of human suffering, and his conclusion wasn't despair, it was liberation. When you understand the biological and psychological forces that control most humans, you can consciously choose to transcend them. The red pill isn't about hating women or becoming bitter about relationships. It's about loving truth enough to rebuild yourself according to reality, rather than comfortable illusions. This is where your real life begins, not when you finally get what you think you want from others, but when you no longer need anything from anyone to be complete. The strong don't walk alone because they hate company. They walk alone because they refuse to compromise their inner tranquility for anyone who doesn't match their level of psychological development. And in that philosophical solitude, they discover a strength that makes them magnetic to the rare individuals who actually deserve their presence.